Forget emperors and battles for a moment. What was it really like to wake up, eat breakfast, and walk the streets as an ordinary Roman citizen? Behind the marble monuments and famous conquests was a bustling, noisy, surprisingly familiar daily life. Today, we step into the sandals of everyday Romans.
A like helps the channel grow. Your subscription helps keep history from being forgotten. Social classes and citizenship. Roman society was strictly organized into a hierarchy that determined nearly every aspect of daily life. At the top were patricians, wealthy aristocratic families claiming descent from Rome's earliest founders. Below them were plebeians, ordinary citizens who made up the majority of Rome's population. Equestrians formed a wealthy business class, often involved in trade, banking, and tax collection. Freedmen were former slaves who had earned or purchased their freedom, gaining limited citizenship rights. Slaves made up a significant portion of the population, with virtually no legal rights of their own. Roman citizenship granted legal protections, voting rights, and access to public services and courts. Women held Roman citizenship, but couldn't vote or hold public political office. Social mobility existed, but was difficult, often achieved through military service or business success. Your birth largely determined your opportunities, though wealth could sometimes blur rigid class lines.
Family life and education. The Roman family was centered around the pater familias, the male head of household with absolute legal authority. This authority technically extended to life and death power over his children and household. Marriages were often arranged for political or economic advantage, rather than romantic love. Girls could legally marry as young as 12, though wealthier families sometimes waited longer. Wealthy boys began formal education around age 7, studying reading, writing, and arithmetic. Education for girls varied widely, with some learning basic literacy at home instead of school. Wealthier families often hired Greek tutors, since Greek language and philosophy were highly respected. Poorer children typically received no formal education, instead learning trades directly from their parents. By their early teens, upper-class boys studied rhetoric and public speaking to prepare for civic life. Family loyalty and ancestral reputation played a central role in shaping a Roman citizen's identity.
Housing and daily living spaces. Housing in Rome varied dramatically based on wealth, from lavish villas to cramped apartment blocks. Wealthy Romans lived in spacious homes called domus, built around a central open-air courtyard. These homes featured elaborate mosaics, frescoed walls, and private gardens for relaxation. Most ordinary Romans, however, lived in crowded multi-story apartment buildings called insulae. These buildings were often poorly constructed, with fire and collapse posing constant dangers. Lower floors of insulae were reserved for wealthier tenants, while upper floors housed the poorest residents. Running water and private bathrooms were luxuries typically found only in wealthier homes. Most city residents relied on public fountains, latrines, and communal facilities for daily needs. Furniture remained relatively simple, with wooden beds, chests, and low tables common in most households. Regardless of class, Roman homes reflected a society deeply divided between luxury and hardship.
Food, meals, and dining customs. A typical Roman day began with a light breakfast called ientaculum, often just bread and cheese. Lunch, known as prandium, was similarly simple, sometimes eaten quickly while standing. The main meal, cena, was eaten in the evening and could range from modest to extravagant. Wealthy Romans hosted elaborate dinner parties, reclining on couches while being served multiple courses. Common ingredients included bread, olive oil, wine, vegetables, and various types of fish. Meat was considered a luxury, typically reserved for special occasions among wealthier citizens. A fermented fish sauce called garum was an incredibly popular condiment across all social classes.
Poorer Romans often ate at thermopolia, ancient street food counters selling hot, ready-made meals. Wine was diluted with water and consumed regularly, even by children, though drunkenness was frowned upon. Dining customs reflected social status just as clearly as clothing or housing did.
Work, trade, and daily business. Rome's economy relied heavily on agriculture, trade, craftsmanship, and slave labor. Farmers grew wheat, olives, and grapes, essential staples of the Roman diet and economy. Skilled craftsmen worked as blacksmiths, potters, carpenters, and jewelers throughout Roman cities. Merchants traded goods from across the empire, filling Rome's bustling marketplaces, or forums. Many businesses were family-run, passing trades and skills down through generations. Slaves performed enormous amounts of labor, from household chores to skilled administrative work. Some educated slaves worked as teachers, accountants, or physicians within wealthy households. The Roman workday typically began at sunrise, with most business concluding by early afternoon. Public baths and social visits often filled the remaining daylight hours after work concluded. Work defined social identity, with different trades carrying varying levels of respect and status.
Clothing, fashion, and hygiene. Clothing in Rome clearly indicated social status, profession, and citizenship. The toga, a large draped garment, was reserved specifically for male Roman citizens. Everyday clothing was simpler, typically consisting of a tunic worn by both men and women. Wealthy Romans wore finer fabrics, like silk or dyed wool, showcasing their status and wealth. Purple-dyed clothing was extremely expensive and largely reserved for emperors and high officials. Women often wore a stola, a long draped dress, along with a palla, or outer shawl. Personal hygiene was highly valued, with public baths playing a central role in daily Roman life. Bathhouses offered hot, warm, and cold pools, alongside exercise areas and social spaces. Romans used scented oils and scrapers called strigils to clean their skin instead of soap. Grooming, bathing, and appearance were deeply tied to Roman ideas of respectability and social standing.
Entertainment and leisure. Entertainment played a massive role in Roman society, uniting citizens across social classes. The Colosseum hosted gladiatorial combats, a brutal but immensely popular form of public spectacle. Chariot races at the Circus Maximus drew massive crowds, with fierce loyalty to competing teams. Public baths doubled as social hubs, where Romans relaxed, gossiped, and conducted informal business practice. Theatrical performances, including comedies and tragedies, entertained audiences in large open-air theaters. Board games and dice games were popular pastimes among Romans of nearly every social class. Wealthy citizens hosted elaborate banquets featuring music, poetry readings, and philosophical discussion. Public festivals and religious holidays provided frequent breaks filled with feasting and celebration. Gambling, though officially restricted, remained a widespread and popular leisure activity. Leisure time reflected Roman values, blending community spectacle with personal relaxation and status display.
Religion and daily beliefs. Religion permeated nearly every aspect of daily Roman life, from politics to household routines. Romans worshipped a vast pantheon of gods, including Jupiter, Juno, Mars, and Venus. Household shrines, called lararia, honored protective spirits believed to guard the family and home. Public temples hosted regular sacrifices, festivals, and rituals meant to maintain favor with the gods. Priests and priestesses, including the famous Vestal Virgins, held important religious and civic roles. Superstition strongly influenced daily decisions, from business deals to travel plans. Omens, such as bird flight patterns, were carefully interpreted before major public and private decisions. As Rome expanded, it absorbed foreign gods and religious practices from conquered territories. Ancestor worship remained important,
with family members honoring deceased relatives through regular rituals. Religion offered both spiritual comfort and practical structure, shaping the daily rhythm of Roman life.
Beneath the grandeur of empire and conquest, everyday Romans lived lives filled with family, food, work, and faith. Lives that feel surprisingly familiar even today. Their daily rituals shaped a civilization that still influences how we live, eat, and organize society. If you enjoyed stepping into ancient Roman life, subscribe for more deep dives into history, and let us know in the comments what era we should explore next.